Hello everyone and welcome to my Bachelor Nation 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The Golden Bachelorette's Joan Vassos leaves Wichita for big event in New York after Chock Chapple refuses to leave Kansas. The Golden Bachelorette star Joan Vassos has been visiting her fiancé Chock Chapple in his native Wichita, but left for a big event in New York City without him in light of his refusal to leave Kansas. Joan, who met Chock during the opening night of the Golden Bachelorette season 1 and quickly fell for him, has been doing a lot of traveling in her time post-show. While Joan and Chock shared that they were hoping to find a place in NYC after the show's finale, things have been moving slowly for the couple, especially amid Chock's disinterest in NYC. In an Instagram story, Joan revealed that she and former Bachelor Charity Lawson would be joining a live podcasting event in NYC, leaving Chock behind in Wichita. "Hey NYC, come join me and at Charity Lawson this Wednesday for a live podcast," she posted, along with a shared post about the event hosted by Randy Rahm. While Joan and Charity are doing a live podcast together, the fact that Chock has once again chosen to stay in Wichita instead of venturing out to NYC with Joan is alarming, though not surprising. Chock's disinterest in living in NYC has become more apparent with time. Joan's most recent time with Chock in Wichita has been the longest stretch she's spent in Kansas since the Golden Bachelorette, but it appears that she's still hooked on her NYC dreams. While Joan has been clear that she's happy with Chock and wants to make moves that work for both of them, it's clear that her intention is still to move away in the near future, while Chock appears to be settled in Kansas. After expanding his influencer network recently, Chock has been doing a lot for the community he's built in Wichita, which makes it tough to leave. While Joan and Chock were open about the way they wanted to proceed after the Golden Bachelorette finale, it seems likely that they're not on the same page anymore. Joan has been back and forth to New York several times in the last few months, while Chock hasn't joined her for the majority of her trips. Joan's decision to head back to New York after a trip to Wichita feels like an indicator she's still very interested in making the Big Apple her new home. Chock, in the meantime, has been hanging back around Kansas, which is pushing them apart. Although the decision is ultimately their own, it's clear that Joan and Chock aren't coming from the same perspective when it comes to living in NYC. Joan, while she's been doing as much as she can in New York, seems like she's going to do what makes Chock happy rather than rocking the boat and pushing NYC. Traveling back and forth to NYC for work may be the best way for her to continue having the best of both worlds, as Chock's distaste for NYC has been obvious from seeing the Golden Bachelorette star sticking to his Wichita roots. Joan Vassos had always been a woman who embraced life's unexpected turns, but she never imagined she'd be at such a crossroads. Fresh from the emotional roller coaster that was the Golden Bachelorette, she had finally found herself torn between two great loves, the charming, ever-romantic Chock Chapple and her passion for new opportunities. But life waits for no one, and Joan was about to make a choice that could change everything. After weeks of private discussions, Joan and Chock had hit a stalemate. Joan had been invited to a prestigious event in New York City, a grand affair where she'd rub shoulders with elite figures from Bachelor Nation, top-tier media, and influential women from around the country. It was an honor, a sign that her journey as the first ever Golden Bachelorette had cemented her place in history, but there was just one problem. Chock wouldn't leave Wichita. Joan had always known that Chock was deeply rooted in Kansas. He ran a successful business, had family close by, and adored the simplicity of life in Wichita. The city meant stability, security, and familiarity for him. He had made it clear from the beginning that he wasn't one for grand adventures, and certainly not for moving to a place as chaotic and bustling as New York. "It's not about not supporting you, Joan," Chock had said during their last conversation. "I think what you're doing is incredible. But I built my life here. This is my home, and I can't just pick up and leave." Joan understood, but that didn't make it any easier. After all, Hadn't she spent most of her life following the paths of others? Raising her children, building a career, being a devoted wife until she lost her husband. It was all about commitment. But now? Now, she had the chance to step fully into her own dreams, to experience something that was truly just for her. Was she really ready to give that up? The day arrived for Joan to board the plane to New York, and the air in Wichita felt heavier than usual. Chock had offered to drive her to the airport, but she declined. The truth was, she wasn't sure if she could handle the long goodbye, the pleading look in his eyes, the silent question of whether she would return for good. Instead, she opted for a quiet, solo car ride, allowing her thoughts to swirl with uncertainty. As the plane ascended, Joan looked down at the city she had briefly called home. Wichita had been good to her. It had given her love, adventure, and a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. But was it the end of her story, or just another chapter? New York was an entirely different world. The moment she stepped out of the airport, the energy of the city wrapped around her like an intoxicating perfume. Bright lights, honking taxis, and a pulse that seemed to beat faster than her own heart greeted her. She had been here before, but this time, she wasn't just a visitor. She was a woman of purpose, of influence. The event was everything she had dreamed of and more. Cameras flashed as she walked into the grand ballroom, elegantly dressed in a gown that shimmered like golden champagne. The crowd was filled with Bachelor Nation alums, producers, and fans eager to hear about her journey. Joan spoke on stage about love, second chances, and the bravery it took to step into the unknown. But even as she smiled and shook hands, her mind drifted to Chock. What was he doing right now? Was he sitting on his porch, looking up at the same moon she could barely see past the towering skyscrapers? Did he regret not coming with her? Or worse, was he relieved? That night, back in her hotel room, Joan stared at her phone, debating whether to call him. Instead, she scrolled through their old text messages, lingering on the ones where he had made her laugh, where he had told her she was the best thing that had happened to him in a long time. A lump formed in her throat. The next morning, as she sipped her coffee and gazed out at the Manhattan skyline, a realization washed over her. Love shouldn't feel like a choice between two lives. Love should be about finding a way to merge two dreams into one. But could she and Chock do that? Or were they simply too different? The event ended, and with her obligations complete, Joan had to decide. Would she fly back to Kansas, to Chock and the stability he offered? Or would she embrace this new chapter fully, taking a leap of faith into the unknown? She picked up her phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Joan." Chock's voice was warm, but there was something unspoken lingering between them. "Hey," she said, exhaling deeply. "I miss you." "I miss you too." A silence stretched between them, thick with everything they weren't saying. "I don't want to lose you, Chock," Joan admitted. "But I also don't want to lose myself." "I know," he replied. "And I don't want to hold you back. I just don't know how we make this work." Joan closed her eyes. "Maybe we don't have to know just yet. Maybe we just take it one step at a time." Chock chuckled softly. "You always did like to keep things interesting." "That's what you love about me," she teased. "That and 100 other things," he said, his voice softer now. "Come home soon?" Joan swallowed hard. "I will. But let's figure out what home really means for us, okay?" And with that, Joan realized she didn't have to have all the answers right away. Life wasn't about choosing between love and ambition. It was about finding someone who would stand by your side as you navigated the unknown. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of Joan and Chock's story. It was just the beginning of a new adventure, one they'd have to write together.